Welcome back to Supernatural Japan, the podcast where we explore the places in Japan that seem peaceful on the surface, but hide violent and unsettling histories beneath the moss and stone. I'm Kevin O'Shea, and today's story takes us to the forested hills of Higashiyama in eastern Kyoto, to one of the city's most revered Zen temple complexes, Nanzen-ji. To modern visitors, Nanzen-ji feels serene and timeless, a place of reflection filled with monks, tourists, and the soft sounds of wind through trees. But behind this beauty is a legend of betrayal, rebellion, and one of the most gruesome executions in Japanese folklore: the death of the outlaw known as Ishikawa Goemon. To understand why Goemon's story became so powerful, we first need to understand the world he lived in. Late 16th century Japan was emerging from the Sengoku period, an era of nearly constant civil war that lasted over 100 years. Entire provinces were devastated, villages burned, and peasants forced into service or starvation. Power belonged to those who could seize it by force, and survival often depended on shifting loyalties. In this unstable world, violence became normal, and public punishment became a political tool. Executions were not just about justice. They were about control, fear, and spectacle. At the center of this new order stood Toyotomi Hideyoshi, a man who rose from humble origins to become the ruler of all Japan. Hideyoshi unified the country through military conquest and ruthless suppression of dissent. His authority was absolute, and challenging him was unthinkable. Anyone who opposed his rule, even symbolically, was not just eliminated, but destroyed publicly, as a warning to everyone else. The climate of terror is what allowed Goemon's story to take root so deeply in the Japanese imagination. In folklore, Ishikawa Goemon is remembered as Japan's version of Robin Hood, a mass outlaw who stole from corrupt elites and gave to the poor. He is often depicted as a ninja trained in secret mountain schools, skilled in stealth, disguise, and assassination. Some stories claim his family was murdered by officials loyal to the ruling class, pushing him into a life of rebellion. In others, he is portrayed as a charismatic rogue who robbed feudal lords, infiltrated castles, and vanished into the night, becoming a symbol of resistance for ordinary people suffering under rigid social hierarchies. Historically, however, Goemon is far more mysterious. There are no reliable records of his childhood, his training, or his supposed ninja background. Most likely, he was simply a criminal, possibly a bandit leader or a smuggler operating in the Kyoto and Osaka area. But over time, his identity transformed through storytelling. Edo period theater reshaped him into a heroic figure, a man who dared to stand against the powerful when no one else could. In a society where open rebellion was nearly impossible, Goemon became a fantasy of justice. The defining moment in Goemon's legend is his supposed attempt to assassinate Toyotomi Hideyoshi. According to the most famous version of the story, Goemon infiltrated Hideyoshi's residence at Fushimi Castle under cover of darkness. Disguised as a servant or shinobi, he crept through the palace corridors with a dagger, planning to kill the ruler in his sleep. But just as he approached his target, a small bell sewn into his clothing rang, echoing through the silent halls and alerting the guards. Other versions of the story describe different failures. Some say Goemon slipped while hiding in the roof beams. Others say he was betrayed by an accomplice who feared the consequences of success. A few historians argue that the assassination attempt never happened at all, and that Goemon was simply caught stealing. Over time, the assassination narrative may have been added to justify the severity of his punishment. But in folklore, the truth matters less than the symbolism. Goemon became a man who dared to challenge a god of war, and failed. Goemon's execution is one of the most horrifying images in Japanese legend. He was sentenced to death by boiling alive inside a massive iron cauldron filled with water and heated over open flames. Crowds gathered to witness the punishment, turning his death into a public performance designed to terrify anyone who might think of resisting authority. This method of execution was so infamous that a pot itself became legendary, giving rise to the term Goemon Buro, still used today for certain types of iron baths. The most tragic detail of this legend is that Goemon was supposedly executed together with his young son. And as the water began to boil, Goemon lifted his child above his head, holding him out of the scalding water for as long as his arms could endure. Only when his strength failed was his child rescued, leaving Goemon to die alone. In kabuki theater, this scene is portrayed in silence, broken only by the sound of bubbling water and crackling fire. It became one of the most emotionally powerful moments in Japanese stage history. A father sacrificing himself in a hopeless attempt to protect his child. When historians examine official records, the story becomes far less clear. Court documents confirmed that a criminal named Ishikawa Goemon was executed in 1594 by order of Hideyoshi, but the method of execution is uncertain. Some sources suggest crucifixion, others burning, and only later theatrical works mentioned boiling. The existence of a child is also highly questionable, with no historical evidence to support it. Most scholars believe that the famous cauldron scene was created or exaggerated during the Edo period for dramatic effect. Yet, folklore often survives precisely because it is not factual. It survives because it expresses emotional truth. The story of Goemon holding his child resonates deeply in a culture that values loyalty, sacrifice, and tragic endurance. Whether or not the event happened exactly as described, the legend became more powerful than history itself, transforming Goemon into a symbol of unjust suffering. Long before it became a Zen sanctuary, the area around Nanzen-ji was associated with punishment and death. During the feudal period, certain districts on the outskirts of Kyoto were used for public executions, where criminals were displayed as warnings. These sites were deliberately chosen away from the city center, separating ordinary life from ritualized violence. When Goemon was executed here, Nanzen-ji became permanently linked with fear and disgrace. Centuries later, the temple was rebuilt and transformed into a place of spiritual purification, as if attempting to cleanse the land of its past. But in Japanese spiritual belief, violent deaths leave behind ki, emotional and spiritual residue that never fully fades. Even if buildings change, the memory of suffering is believed to remain embedded in the landscape. quietly influencing those who walk through it. Local ghost stories claim that Goemon never truly left Nanzen-ji. Monks have reported hearing the sound of boiling water late at night, even when the temple grounds are empty. Others describe sudden waves of heat rising from cold stone paths, or the faint smell of smoke drifting through the air without any visible source. Some visitors claim to see a shadowy figure standing near the Sanmon gate after sunset, staring down the steps as if he is waiting for someone who will never arrive. Even more disturbing are the stories of a second spirit. A small boy seen wandering near the trees or disappearing into the forest when approached. Some say they hear a child crying softly near the old execution area, while others report the sensation of being watched by something unseen. In traditional Japanese lore, spirits born from injustice and unresolved sorrow become onryo, restless ghosts bound to a place of their suffering. If such beings exist, Goemon and his son would certainly be among them. Despite being labeled a criminal by history, Ishikawa Goemon never vanished from Japanese culture. Instead, he became immortal. He appears in kabuki plays, bunraku puppet theater, anime, manga, and video games. He is remembered not as a villain, but as a tragic rebel who challenged absolute power and paid with his life. Even the iron bath, known as a Goemon Buro, preserves his name, turning an execution method into a cultural artifact. In modern Japan, children growing up knowing Goemon's story, not because he succeeded, but because he dared. His legend transformed execution into mythology and suffering into memory. He became proof that even in a rigid and violent society, people longed for heroes who stood against injustice, even if they failed. Nanzen-ji today is a place of extraordinary beauty. Tourists photograph autumn leaves, monks sweep stone paths, and the world feels calm and ordered. Yet, beneath the quiet lies a story of boiling flesh, political terror, and unresolved grief. The cauldrons are gone, the crowds have vanished, and the screams have faded into legend. But the stories remain. And sometimes, in places like Nanzen-ji, it is not the ghosts that haunt us most, but the knowledge of what human beings once did to each other in the name of power, fear, and control. Thanks for listening to Supernatural Japan. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you like the show and want to help us grow, please leave a review and a rating. It really makes a difference. Over on Spotify, leave a comment and a rating. These really help people notice us and find us. Now, to see pictures that depict this tale that we talked about today, as well as the Nanzen-ji Temple, follow us on Instagram at Supernatural Japan, as well as our awesome Facebook group. The links are in the show notes. And we have a website, everyone. Finally, go check out supernaturaljapan.com. This will soon be the main hub for the podcast, hosted with recent episodes, a blog about spooky Japan, links to social media, and a lot more. It's still very much so a work in progress. It's in its infancy, but it's there, and it's going to grow and become more awesome. So make sure you bookmark it, supernaturaljapan.com. Now, please email me with your thoughts, ideas, questions about supernatural things in Japan, or simply to say hello. I love reading email from all of you awesome people. You can email me anytime you like at supernaturaljapan@gmail.com. Now, you can also follow me on Blue Sky and X at Mad for Maple. You can support the show over on Buy Me a Coffee. that supports all of my creative work. The links are all in the show notes. Also, folks, check out my weekly diary podcast, Tales from Kevin, as well, where I talk about my experiences as a Canadian living in Asia for the past 24 years. It's everywhere you find podcasts. It's everywhere you find this podcast. So, thank you so much for listening, and remember to share Supernatural Japan with your spooky, history-loving friends. And that's it for now. So no matter where you are in the world, stay healthy, stay happy, and stay spooky.